Good Wednesday evening, everyone. It is 7:30, time for our direct line, and we have our guest tonight. It's Chris Burnett. Not only is he just a candidate for Maryland's 6th congressional district, he's also an expert in the Middle East and foreign policy realms. We welcome to the show and our hosts. I am filling in for the vacationing Jackie Saxton.
I think we should say Jackie is on assignment. She's probably testing cruises or whatever someplace. But anyway, we have the man, the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the camera, who's on tonight.
Yes.
So, welcome, Chris, tell us how your campaign is going, and what are the next steps for it?
Well, first, thanks for having me on again. I always look forward to coming on to Direct Line. So this is going to be a great night, a great topic. There's a ton of stuff in the news, but the campaign is of course ramping up. We've been going at this for quite a while. You know, as I came off active duty, I spent quite a bit of time doing the rounds and introducing myself. And we've sort of moved through phases of immediate introduction, developing out a basic introductory platform. And then we've sort of now pivoted to what is the platform for the primary that's going to essentially be the foundation to go beyond the primary, assuming that we can pull together the support that we need in June. What that means is we've set up we've got a volunteer network across all 5 counties, Garrett, Allegheny, Washington, Frederick, and down here in Montgomery County. This month is packed. We're doing a series of smaller fundraisers, either a happy hour, an in-home hosted fundraiser, and we've got 1 or 2 major events. We've got an event coming up on the 22nd at the Capitol Hill Club, and at the end of the month, we're going to be up in Hagerstown for a dinner, invite-only dinner for some folks in the area at the country club there. But really, the biggest part at this point, and you all know this, it's just down to arithmetic. You have to get outside of the echo chamber of your immediate political activist types and now get into the more primary voter, and particularly a midterm primary voter. So we're expanding out with both media advertising, doing direct mail, and some text messaging. But we're also going to just do the standard blocking and tackling. So tomorrow morning, I'll be in Frederick doing some sign waving. We'll be handing out some signs, and then by tomorrow evening, I'll be in Allegheny at the club meeting doing a quick overview of the innovation corridor for that group of people. And then the rest of the week will be more of the same, which is some door knocking this weekend, some sign waving, and yard sign distribution.
Sounds like a busy week for you.
I think it's going to be that way through the primary.
It is not only no, I was going to say no rest for the weary. There's no rest for the weary. Your family has been out on the trail quite a bit as well. I know I saw them last week.
They're my best volunteers because they can't say no.
Yeah, and I tell you, and your wife did a great job. I noticed she was representing you at the Chevy Chase Women's Brunch. I think you were somewhere out in Western Maryland that day.
That sounds about right. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was the day I was out in Garrett for we were out with the Masons in the morning on a bird hunt. We went to a gun bash out there, and we're handing out materials. And then I had to drop off some more signs. So it was, I think that was the same day. You know, I forgot to mention, and part of the reason why we wanted to have this conversation tonight, I always knew I was going to need to expand out this race. Whoever is going to go against Trone or Delaney, they're going to have to nationalize this race. So what I've been doing over the last week is I've done a series of national interviews. It started with Laura Trump. I had a couple of podcasts. I did the David Rutherford show, the Chris DeGaulle show. I was on News Nation twice, all talking about what's going on in the Middle East, my experience in the Middle East, my background in education. And then this morning I was on America's Voice talking about the ceasefire, what the ceasefire will look like, and then what we think is next. And that was always a known element. And it just happened to align with the primary sprint that we're able to move into this more national audience, because that's the level of support that we're going to need to have to really beat the Democrat machine, whether it's Trone or Delaney. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. And if it's Trone, and we've talked about it, he spent $60 million on a failed Senate bid. At this point, I think the number is unlimited. He's trying to run on pure ego. He's trying to restore his status. I would imagine he's going to throw $50-60 million at this. You can't buy authenticity. So what we're, of course, going to do is the blocking and tackling, and then talk about the things that are most prevalent in the news today, which is foreign policy, national security, and the affordability crisis in Maryland that has been created by the Democrat supermajority that we can thank for excessive fees, taxes, and everything under the sun.
Yeah. So let's go ahead, Dwight.
No, go ahead, Mark. I'll let you go.
I was going to say, so talk about a little bit. You've been doing more interviews on foreign policy. What are the questions and what are the takeaways from what you've been saying?
Well, I'd start with, oftentimes people just want to understand the basic framework as to, well, the Strait of Hormuz was open, now it's closed. Have we lost ground? And my answer is normally, well, first of all, it's not that simple. Second of all, the fact that it is now closed and it's closed out of desperation demonstrates the force and capability that Iran always possessed and that was escalating costs over the last 4 decades. Everything we've done has been at the risk of Iran shutting it down arbitrarily or attacking something without any provocation. Whenever I've transited the Strait of Hormuz, we had to accept a different ROE and a different escalation of force continuum because of what was determined to be Iranian saber rattling. That yes, it's escalatory. Yes, it's going to appear to be an attack, but we have to absorb more risk because it's Iranian saber rattling. So when I tell people that, one, this was an unacceptable status quo of them maintaining some level of dominance in an international strait, by its definition, it's meant to be a safe passage for commercial vessels. It's meant to be for the good of the common good. So the fact that it was open but held at risk by Iran was an unacceptable standard just from an international shipping standpoint. But when you start to look at the effect that it had on U.S. military operations, the number of people that have been either killed, attacked, or put at risk by Iran or Iranian proxies from either operating in the Strait of Hormuz, anywhere in the region, whether it was Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, certainly in Iraq or in Syria, the whole entire area was dominated by an Iranian or Iranian proxy threat. So as I try to unpack all of this, depending on how much time we have, I'll either focus on it was an unacceptable status quo, where we're at is a transitional phase of going from an unacceptable standard to what will be whatever is next, and in my opinion, should be an international effort to maintain an international strait as opposed to the U.S. Navy. And then I try to close out with, we've essentially been subsidizing the world's prosperity by ensuring global trade and free access to shipping lanes. This is a shared responsibility and that we need to hold our NATO partners to their obligation, as well as other beneficiaries of a global economy that we've essentially been subsidizing.
And
to that, go ahead, Dwight.
Oh, yeah. And I was saying to the point, Iran has, you can't take an international body. I'm seriously thinking, why have we never thought of putting a canal to bypass? This is something we should have maybe 20 years ago. Because remember, this is not the first time we've had issues with the Strait of Hormuz. When we were escorting those reflagged Kuwaiti oil tankers, they did have their gunboats attack, and there was a little bit of a firefight. I believe it may have been the same firefight that took down an Iranian airliner.
Well, I can tell you, when we transited, and this is on a warship, I was on the USS Boxer, which is currently en route to the Middle East. When I was on the 13th MEU, it was known they had what was called the Four Horsemen, and these were 4 fast boats that would come out and engage. Mm-hmm. And by engage, they would come within 200 meters, oftentimes with missiles or heavy machine guns, and they would just basically cut in front of the ship or do things that were escalatory, where anywhere else in the world we would sink that ship on pure self-defense, the anticipatory self-defense alone. The idea being that the attack is imminent. There's not enough time between where they are and closing the distance to the ship for us to do anything other than engage. In the Strait of Hormuz, we had to tolerate that, and that was an acceptable level of risk just because it was Iran. So whenever you start to think about what they've been doing and how they've been managing the Strait of Hormuz, I hate to say it, whether it was cost or just a status quo mentality, there's any number of things we should have done over the last 4 decades to prevent this moment, which is a heavily armed, very capable Iranian regime. And they're now facing an existential threat. This next phase is going to be difficult. And I know we talked a little offline. This ceasefire is going to be very difficult. I think it was 100% the right thing to do, mostly because we had achieved almost every single military objective that had been laid out. And we've forgotten that whenever you deploy a military force, you have very specific military objectives that should align with a strategic or political objective. Right. So we've set the conditions for a political or diplomatic solution that now has to happen separate and apart from active combat operations. So I was very happy to see, regardless of the rhetoric around what was going to happen at the deadline or not, that we did give an off-ramp to Iran. We're allowing them to reset, and basically, if they can keep the strait open, then we'll allow for some part of the peace process to unfold. And this gets to the question we had earlier: do we want regime change? Well, I think we would hope that the Iranian people will be able to make a choice of their own and eliminate the current regime on their own terms. But I would hate to see any boots on the ground. And I think it would be very difficult to make the case to the American people that we're going to put boots on the ground for Iranian regime change, even with the human rights concerns that have been laid out on display.
You appropriately kind of addressed the issue. We've got military objectives, but we've got political objectives. Opening the strait, I mean, it's entirely possible that they can open the strait for a period of time, but then the threat continues well into the future, and it's going to change the dynamic with the neighbors and with international shipping. I guess I'm struggling a little bit with that as a political objective. Is that really all we want, is to keep that open?
I don't know that I think it's whether you call it a strategic or political objective, I don't know that it's a military objective. And that's what I wanted to be careful to distinguish.
No, appropriately so. Yes. No, you yes, you did that. Yes.
And then however this is, whether this is part of an international coalition is formed, there's a UN-led UN Security Council resolution of some sort that's going to provide for international escorts, or there's going to be some other provisions to ensure the safe passage or transit passage of commercial vessels. That's whatever is next. The fact that we've eliminated upwards of 80% of their combat capability, whether it was missiles, drones, launch pads, or their industrial complex, we've set the conditions for a very diminished Iranian regime to negotiate its end. And then to set the conditions for the Iranian people to decide what they want next. My biggest concern is that we somehow get baited into a military objective of opening the Strait of Hormuz. And I don't mean to sound callous or indifferent, but we've maintained the Strait of Hormuz really for the benefit of the global economy, which we are the indirect beneficiaries of. But we get very little benefit from the Strait of Hormuz ourselves. Now, that's not to say that we don't have an interest in how liquid natural gas and oil and petroleum products that move through the Strait of Hormuz doesn't benefit the global economy, which indirectly benefits us. But we've paid a disproportionate price to keeping the Strait of Hormuz open, despite Iran's efforts over the last 40 years. I think this, if nothing else, has certainly put on display the inability of some of our partners and some of our allies to really do anything for their own well-being. And this has basically said to the world, hey, look, this is what we're capable of. However, you now need to assist in your own well-being, whether it's upping your the percentage of your gross domestic product towards defense, or it's allocating the appropriate resources so that you can ensure that you have the things that you need. But whenever you have NATO partners not allowing basing or overflight for an operation that's in furtherance of global security and peace, that is troubling. And I think we're going to have to revisit the status of some of our arrangements with NATO partners and hold their feet to the fire and say, look, if you want this to be an enduring partnership, and it's been invaluable over the last seven decades, if you want this to continue, you have to do your part, and we have to be able to call upon you when needed, and we have to have a shared interest in the global security that we were sworn to uphold together.
And it's an interesting question, though. I mean, with the exception, I guess, of some missiles that were fired at Turkey, which probably wasn't in the Iranians' long-term interest. This is really outside the parameters of what the NATO agreement, the existing NATO agreement, calls for.
Yes, in the sense that it's defense of one is defense of others. But what you're seeing here is that we're asking for assistance in how we would effectuate peace that benefits them. In other words, we're going to stabilize a region that they've become dependent upon, that they couldn't operate on but for us. And the fact that we're taking actions initially in anticipatory self-defense in light of what we thought was an imminent attack against U.S. interests or U.S. forces, and that we're now fulfilling the rest of that responsibility to ensure that commercial shipping can begin and continue again, I think that there is a role, not necessarily for NATO itself, but for our NATO partners to assist.
Okay, I did want to make that. Yeah, I did want to make that distinction.
Yeah. I want to say part of the problem, I think, with a lot of our European allies, they've had decades of open immigrations. Where you look at France, you look at Great Britain, they've got a large Muslim population. I think part of the things that's always in the back of their mind is, if we do this, are we going to see London burn? Are we going to see Paris burn with riots? That's something that's always in, because remember, the French and the Brits, as well as the Germans, they've been at the receiving end of a lot over the years. They haven't in recent years, but of international terrorists. You had the discotheque bombings in Frankfurt back in the 80s, done by the Libyans. You had attack on the French trains, and number of attacks, and these aren't even from the IRA in London. You've had attacks by Islamic extremists in London as well. I think part of the thing that does play into it's not an excuse for them. Honestly, they need to take, this should be a red flag for any politician in America that wants to have open borders. You get held hostage by the new minorities that come into your country. I know our Maryland politicians like Chris Van Hollen and even David Trone's been very critical of, as I like to call it, the liberation of Iran. My point is, we're
a long ways from the liberation of Iran. But let me come back. I mean, one of the things that the Iranian have used as a power, because the Strait is an important source. Let me put it a little differently: is a huge source of oil or throughput for China. And obviously Iran has a close relationship with Iran, and they were kind of the access with Russia. The Iranian intention is to allow that shipping to go through and to be selective as to who goes through the Strait and who doesn't. And to Dwight's point, there's kind of a potential lever there of specific countries reaching their separate peace with Iran in order to allow for that transit to take place through the Strait.
Paying the tolls.
Well, exactly, paying the tolls, which is a scenario that kind of puts us in a very difficult. I mean, some European countries, some other countries may well decide that's a price worth paying it, as opposed to getting involved with a military engagement. I guess what I'm trying to straight is there is the Iranian strategy on a long-term basis for continuing to exercise a chokehold over the Straits.
I think it's the only leverage they have. And what's interesting about that is that violates the very definition of an international strait. No one country can dominate or take possession of an international strait. It's an international strait. It's meant to be for the common good. And the fact that Iran has held it at risk for all these years has created this new normal, this status quo of, we're going to tolerate escalations, we're going to tolerate inflammatory language, we're going to write it off as saber rattling, and then we're going to see what complacency does in Europe and in Asia. They get an enormous amount of their energy needs from the Middle East and through the Strait of Hormuz. And I think what we really demonstrated here was that between taking out Venezuela as an ally to China, Russia, and other adversaries, and now addressing the Strait of Hormuz, we've really closed down some of the combat reach of China and Russia and some other countries. That my concern 5 years ago was that we were going to fight a four-front war. And let me kind of circle back on this. My concern was always that you were going to have Russia escalate in Europe. You would have Iran escalate in the Middle East, probably with Israel. North Korea would go into South Korea, and then China would take on Taiwan. In a matter of a year, we've managed to reset this entire chessboard, in part because we got rid of Maduro in Venezuela. We no longer have a sanctuary in our hemisphere for both Russia and China, and arguably in Iran. In the Middle East, the greatest thorn in our side was always Iran, and what was Iran going to do? I was telling a story earlier. There was a point during my last deployment where we couldn't, at the time it was all classified. It has since been declassified. But even then, we were having trouble dealing with our NATO partners that were deployed with us for CJTF OIR. That was the counter ISIS mission. So we were in a counter ISIS mode, but we would go into a US mode, and we were dealing with what we called OMGs, or outlaw militia groups operating in Baghdad, and they were primarily Iranian proxies. And I'll tell you, the first time I was in a meeting and somebody briefed OMG, and there's generals and serious people, and we hear OMGs operating in Baghdad, it made everyone laugh. But you realize just how much of an influence they had on the region. And when you start to think about Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the proxies that were operating in Iraq and Syria, and then the effect that Iran had on the region, we have reset the global order in a way that I don't think anybody expected to have occurred over the course of 10 or 20 years, let alone 1 year. So I'm willing to take each of these steps, even if it's a step back in order to take 2 steps forward later. What we're doing to reset the threat matrix and how we deploy forces and how we help the global economy and provide for our own national security has changed dramatically. And it has improved dramatically, even if people can't necessarily see that right now because gas prices are high and tariffs seem to be increasing the cost of living. These are all an indirect consequence of resetting a global order that was going to, I thought, cause us to find, potentially be the groundwork for a World War III. I believe we are on the path to avoiding that cataclysmic outcome by having these sort of piecemeal solutions now having a collective benefit of eliminating Venezuela from the equation, eliminating Iran and its proxies from this equation, essentially really putting China on ice. They now realize there's very little they can do to operate without the access that we've been providing for their own resources. You haven't heard a peep out of North Korea in the last 6 months, and Russia is so far overextended in Europe and in Ukraine that I think Europe probably is breathing easier now to see that things are de-escalating in a way that maybe nobody foresaw 6 months ago. So that, in a nutshell, is where I feel like we've made some progress. Whether or not we're in a great place with Iran today is relative to the overall progress we've made with global security.
I appreciate your taking the strategic view, because I do think that is sometimes frequently lost in this, and how this plays into Iran is rather into China is extremely important in the conversation. And I know you referenced these are international waters. Obviously, the fact that there are multiple points along a very long supply line to China is a hugely significant consideration for China should it decide to get adventurous, because there are multiple choke points along that path, and we obviously still have a very, very strong, we have for a long time had a very, very strong Navy that's in a position to block that off.
We have hands down the most capable military in the.
Yes.
I knew how extraordinary the military was when I was in it. As we've seen, I think the American people are seeing just how extraordinary the U.S.'s capability to operate anywhere at any time in any conditions, just how obvious this has become. And you hear about China, doubling, tripling, quadrupling its number of military vessels or hybrid vessels. They couldn't do any of the things we're doing on their best day, let alone what the U.S. military does every single day. So their Belt and Road Initiative runs into a brick wall every single scenario that you run it through, because they cannot project power. At the end of the day, they're wholly dependent on the shipping lanes that we secure. We've been subsidizing global prosperity for decades in the name of freedom of navigation. As we pull ourselves back, as we decouple from that global security role that we've taken on, and we've pulled back from a global supply chain that we've seen as vulnerable, we're resetting the world order around the ability for individual countries to take better care of their own interests or to form alliances that are going to be beneficial as opposed to dependency, which is what we've created over the last 20 or 30 years with a lot of our allies and partners. And I'm not blaming them for it. I think we willingly took this on, but we're now finding out we just can't sustain this level of support to the world and not leave our own people behind.
Very true. And also, along the same lines, we're also seeing the fact that Venezuela is no longer sending oil to China, crippling Iran right now. They're not sending much oil to China right now, which China, if you're in Beijing, you got to kind of, can we really do this Taiwan thing right now, without oil?
Yes.
And Kim Jong-un over in North Korea, hey, if I don't, I barely have enough energy and oil to keep the lights on. I'm not getting any oil anymore. So what am I going to, So I think strategically,
the market, but Dwight, the market has responded. In fact, despite the cutoff, obviously prices have gone up, but it's actually, it sounds counterintuitive having looked at the prices lately, but it's actually amazing how flexible the market has been. And it, as you mentioned, it dropped today, but how flexible the market has been able to adapt to supply lines. But you're absolutely right. The Chinese they have a lot to watch because their supply lines are far worse than just about any other country. They're far more dependent on international trade.
They really are.
Yeah. And so, but the point is, my whole point was that it was brilliant on the tactical way for the president to kind of send a message to China without even sending a real message, saying, "Look what we can do." The fact that we found the CIA technology found the pilot on a mountain in Iran. The CIA was gutted prior to this. I am very impressed with the level of technology they're using. Just imagine the stuff that we don't know that they're using,
So the question is, was that CIA or NSA? Well, I understand CIA is taking credit for that. But
yeah, CIA is taking credit for it.
We used to joke that all the three-letter agencies, they all just kind of, we give them credit, like the three-letter agencies, whatever one did.
Yeah, I know they're all lumped in together, and
it was amazing.
Anonymous, but it would be a bit of a digression, but I won't go down that road. But I'll give the NSA a great deal of credit for what they can do.
Yes, and I think that's the important takeaway there was, the modern U.S. military it's got extraordinary capability. Not only are it's the highest trained and most professional people that we've ever had in terms of standards and execution. I think a large part of what we've seen over the last year in particular was with Secretary Hegseth focusing on a warrior mindset. And I think you heard from Mattis, and it didn't really manifest, in my opinion. It was, if it didn't make us a more lethal force, why are we doing it? And I think a lot of that got lost in the Biden years. And I think you saw Secretary Hegseth immediately implement that, which is to say, we got to focus on warfighting. Let's focus on being the very best at whatever it is we do, whether you're the best radio operator, the best grunt, or the best high-speed operator, you're going to be the very best at it. And we've seen this now on display twice. Venezuela, the operation was flawless, and that is not an easy mission. I was a part of the very early planning of what we thought was going to be a non-combatant evacuation in 2018 and 2019. Early on, when Venezuela was popping off, we were given the task of preparing to extricate or pull out, all the U.S. citizens. And there was tens of thousands of U.S. citizens that we would potentially have to pull out of Venezuela if things completely fell apart. So one of the things I worked on in 2017 and 18 while I was at U.S. Southern Command was establishing a targeting list. And the targeting list involved all of the military and potential dual use facilities. And what I meant by that was, because everything was state owned, you had a lot of communications equipment that was being used for civilian use, but it was also important for military purposes. So we went through this robust list of 300 or 400 targets that were legitimate military targets of command and control, basing or other capabilities, air defense. And we basically mapped what would be an ingress and egress route. And that, I'm certain, was part of the groundwork that was used for the Venezuela operation. And so when people saw that this flawless operation occurred, that was probably 10 years in the making, because you had all of these folks looking at the problem, reviewing it, updating it, and constantly revisiting what it is we were going to try to achieve. And what you saw was a flawless execution of it. Was not an easy mission by any stretch. And then, Dwight, like you said, to pluck a pilot out from an unknown location, having been shot down without losing a single U.S. service member and not a single piece of equipment, that's extraordinary. And I think that in itself sends an incredible message of, one, we don't leave anyone behind. And that's incredibly reassuring while you're deployed, to know that if you're ever separated or isolated, the cavalry's coming for you. But also it tells the rest of the world we can do things that nobody else can even dream of, let alone try to execute to the level that we execute at. And I'll tell one other funny story about this. Whenever we were in the last part of CJTF OAR, we would operate in an area called the Qasmili Deconfliction Zone. And this was a part of Syria where you had Russian troops, you had SDF, you had local militia, U.S. forces. It was a bit of a mess. And any given day, you would have forces bumping into each other. And we were convinced that the Russians were screwing with us, because they would claim that they got off route, they lost a patrol, they would bump into us, they'd shoot at us. And we realized, we're like, man, these guys are really good. I mean, they constantly are keeping us on our toes. Well, come to find out, they're truly incompetent. Like, we were giving them way too much credit. Like, they were quite literally getting lost. They were shooting at us because they didn't know who they were shooting at. And it was just amazing that whenever you look at that, was their best forces at the time. And this was 2021. And we all know what happened across the Wagner group. But it was amazing the level of competency and professionalism that we've come to expect in the U.S. military. We were basically projecting that onto them. When we found ourselves confused, we thought it was intentional. We were confused because they were truly that incompetent.
Yeah, it is. One of the things that's particularly remarkable is this: the signals and signal intelligence that went into the operation. And you think, obviously, of the precision in which the various decapitation campaigns were able to take place, having that real-time information as to who was where, when they were all getting together for a meeting, and the detail that has continued on is remarkable. We talked about China, and one of the takeaways that I particularly enjoyed was, I don't know that we did this, it may have been the Israelis, but basically accessing the Chinese provided cameras out in the street, that the Chinese are like, this is part of their model, the business model, or the government's model that they want to promote around the world. But hacking into those cameras to be able to track what was going on in real time must have been a real shock in Beijing. To find out, I'm trying to when I read about this, I'm trying to picture the conversation of Xi Jinping asking, can they do that to us now?
We're already looking.
Well, my last duty station, we've talked about this, was at Mar 4 Cyber, which is on East Campus at Fort Meade, and I'm amazed at what the NSA is able to do. This quickly. Obviously, most of it starts at top secret and it only gets beyond there. But it is extraordinary, the level of capability that they have, and just how brilliant some of the people that work at NSA are. And these are government employees. And that's when you hear about, there's plenty of government waste, there's plenty of fraud and unnecessary redundancy. But when you start getting into these highly technical areas, you have some extraordinary public servants. These are people that probably could be making a lot more money anywhere else. And these are civilians. And they believe so strongly in the mission that they're willing to accept government pay dealing with military folks. Because quite frankly, we're abrasive. We want to do things faster. We usually want to cut corners. And you've got civilians that are just brilliant. And they put up with working next to military constantly turning over every couple of years just because of the way we move around. And I think what you saw, not only do you have incredible operators on the ground, your trigger pullers, your folks that went in and actually extracted him, But there were thousands of people behind that will never be thanked and would probably never ask for a thank you, that were working at a cubicle somewhere on Fort Meade assisting that mission. And they're as important to that outcome as any trigger puller that actually pulled him out of that crevice in the mountain. So I know you both know this, but it's worth saying again, this is an extraordinary team of incredible input from a broad spectrum of backgrounds and ability that make these incredible outcomes a reality. Because you couldn't dream of a scenario where we would have 2 pilots go down, we would recover both of them and not lose a single piece of equipment besides the plane that was shot down, and not lose a single individual after a significant firefight with an adversary.
Absolutely. And also, I want to just get your thoughts on the Artemis mission. They're coming home this Friday, and just give me your thoughts, on Artemis, and just give me your thoughts on Artemis.
Well, I mean, you're clearly gonna mop the floor with us on this one, as you should. I mean, as a just a layman, yeah. I'm blown away by what these folks are able to do, the level of complexity and detail in what we're achieving. And I go back to, I was able to watch the launch with my 16-year-old son and my 9-year-old daughter. And that's a moment you really can't replicate. You see the true awe of their witnessing of something that, no one has really seen in nearly 60, almost 50 years, I'd say, maybe 45 years. And to have them inspired to what now is capable, what could be next, and what their contribution could be. That was the most special part for me, which was enjoying that moment, witnessing history with my kids.
Yeah, and also, what are your? And you also say you've got. Where are you going to be this week, where people can come out and say hello to you?
Well, tomorrow we'll be in Frederick doing some sign waving. That will be somewhere along 270. I got a couple of folks that have some areas designated. I'm just going to go where they tell me to go. So look for us on the road tomorrow in Frederick. So probably somewhere around 270 or some of those on ramps to 270.
You are a true Maryland politician if you've embraced sign waving.
Well,
But the good news when you think about your district is because of the highway, the 270 going up to 70, you really have some great opportunities to be seen by a large number of people along those routes.
And as we've talked about, a big part of what I'm running on is an economic development package that involves the 270, I-70 corridors, and as well as I-68 and I-81. So for me to get out there along the highways and to do the sign waving, one, it's within my budget. It's clearly where it falls squarely into what we have available in terms of budget for these types of activities. So free is the ideal operative term there. But the idea of getting out and spending some time on these routes, where I've suggested that we designate opportunity zones at existing industrial and commercial sites for redevelopment as a potential receptacle for a data center, AI and quantum computing, as well as advanced manufacturing, incorporating that small modular reactor and potentially a water treatment plant. This aligns with the platform of what we're proposing, which is addressing affordability through opportunity. And I don't hear another candidate anywhere in Maryland with an actual plan to address affordability that aligns national security priorities, some of the concerns that we have over poor planning around data centers, and then most importantly, any type of advanced manufacturing. You hear people talk about it, but this is the only plan that I'm aware of that actually hits the nail on the head, gives us a pathway to prosperity over the next 5, 10, or 15 years.
Absolutely. And one of the things, we're coming up to the close of our show. 45 minutes goes so fast when you're having fun. But one place, I don't know if you like Italian food, there's a great place in Baltimore in Perry Hall called Missoni's. It has the best Italian food I've had.
I'm willing to bet that Chris has been on enough that he saw that one coming a mile away.
And if you go to Missoni's and mention the Bob and Kendall podcast, you get a discount. a 10% discount when you mentioned Bob, and everybody should be watching the Bob and Kendall podcast too, along with ours. But yeah, so we've got that. And what's your website again, Chris? Where can people find you? Where can people send you some money?
Well, Dwight, I have to say, you've mastered the conversational plug. I mean, that was a thing of beauty.
It's years in the making.
So I won't do nearly as good of a job, but if anybody wants to learn anything about the campaign, it's BURNETTForCongress.com. We post all of the long form videos, all of the short videos that we put out. The innovation corridor details are there, and we're building a tab for any events that we've run. We usually will try to do a follow-up or what our next events are. So it's BURNETTForCongress.com.
And they can donate money to you there too, right? Because
yes, there's a donate link to our WinRed page.
Because $100 buys you 4 4x8 signs.
It does. It's funny you mentioned that. I mean, and that's part of the value proposition we've been trying to present is taking, whether it's a $5, $50, or a $3,000 donation, turning that directly into what is an actionable item for us. In other words, whether it's buying a number of text messages, buying a number of direct mailers or signs or anything else. But you're 100% right. The campaign, it comes down to arithmetic. The money you raise is the number of voters you can engage. Number of voters you can engage turns into the votes you need at the primary.
Absolutely.
And Dwight, tomorrow night we have the Attorney General candidate.
Yeah, we've got Pizza and Politics. Come meet our next Attorney General, Jim Rutledge. Learn more about Jim at electjim.com. Jim is going to be speaking. Also, our comptroller candidate, she's just going to stop by and say hello as well, Sonia Dunn. Mm-hmm. I don't know if she's got any prepared remarks she's going to do, but she will be there as well. And as will a number of other candidates who are running for county council are going to be there. It'll be a lot of fun. Meet Jim, meet the other candidates. Mama Lucia's Only Maryland at 6:30. Pizza and Politics.
I wish I could join you. I'm going to be in Allegheny tomorrow night with the Allegheny Alliance. But I really enjoyed your Pizza and Politics. It's a great evening. Sorry, I'm going to miss it tomorrow.
But we'll have you out there again, probably sometime in June, right before the primary. We'll have you out there.
Great. Look forward to it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed this conversation.
I can't thank you enough. I really enjoy any chance to talk about these issues. And I knew that tonight you would throw some curveballs, and you did. So this was great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny how this all happened last Friday I think it was in Final Thoughts we went down this road.
Yes. And I think we barely scratched the surface. I mean, this is not going to go away. We could get into the reason for the ceasefire, what's going to follow the ceasefire, whether or not this was a strategic decision in and of itself to set the conditions for the expiration of the War Powers Resolution at 60 days, and whether there's still military necessity. There's a dozen more questions we could delve into, but we only have so much time.
That was actually interesting. Yep.
And you can always learn more at your website about these topics as well.
Yes.
Cool. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Let's go down to Missoni, where Italian cuisine shines. Let's go down